I'm going to go ahead and ask the panelists to go ahead and come up along with our moderator, and I'll introduce to you them as they come. We'll ask them to come on up to the platform if they would, please. While they're coming, I'll go ahead and read some of their bios to share with you, our panelists, and I know that you will welcome them warmly as they come. I want to start by introducing Cal Dooley. He is President and CEO of the American Chemistry Council. Since joining the ACC in 2008, Dooley has enhanced member value and strengthened the competitive position of U.S. chemical manufacturers by advocating for business and regulatory climate, a climate that drives innovation, supports job growth, and enhances safety. Under his leadership, ACC has achieved some of the greatest successes. In 2016, Mr. Dooley oversaw bipartisan negotiations and oversaw the enactment of the Frank R. Littenberg Chemical Safety for the 21st Century Act, a legislation which reformed the U.S. Toxic Substance Control Act of 1976. In 2015, ACC led the efforts resulting in the enactment of two bills governing freight rail transportation and distribution. Another thing recognized for during his tenure at ACC, he secured the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act, providing industry a safe harbor against lawsuits when voluntarily sharing and receiving information concerning cyber threats and defenses themselves. Along with those things, early in ACC, his leadership was critical to ensuring that federal and state policymakers understood the link between domestic shale gas, the chemical industry, and growth in America's manufacturing sector that drives U.S. competitiveness, boosts exports, and creates new, high-paying jobs for all. Prior to joining ACC, Dooley was served as president of CEO of Grocery Manufacturers Association, the GMA. He took over leadership of GMA after serving as president and CEO of Food Products Association, the FPA, which merged with GMA in January of 2007. In Congress, Dooley represented the 20th District of California as a member of the U.S. House of Representatives from 1991 to 2004, and he served the House Agricultural Committee as well as House Resource Committee. Would you help me welcome Cal as he comes to the platform this morning? Let's give him a warm welcome. Thank you, Cal. I want to also welcome Commissioner Toby Baker, along with his two fellow full-time commissioners. Baker established overall agency direction and policy and makes final determinations on contested permitting and enforcement matters. Baker also serves as Governor Abbott's appointee to the Gulf Coast Ecosystem Restoration Council and represents Texas as the chair on the Gulf Coast Mexico Alliance Management Team and serves on the Coastal Land Advisory Board. Prior to his appointment, Baker was a policy and budget advisor on energy, natural resources, and agricultural issues for the governor's office, where he also was the liaison between office and members of the legislation and the Railroad Commissioner of Texas, the TCEQ, and the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. He is a past natural resource policy advisor to Senator Craig Estes and the former director of the Clerk of Texas Senate Subcommittee on Agricultural, Rural Affairs, and Coastal Resources. Baker received his bachelor's degree from Texas A&M University, where he is a member of the Corps of Cadets, a Master of Public Service and Administration. Would you help me welcome him today? Thank you, Commissioner, for sharing with us today. Come on, give him a warm welcome. We are glad to have him today. What a privilege. Thank you so much. I wanted to also welcome today Senator Larry Taylor. He is a lifelong Texan and a lifelong Baylor University graduate, so we welcome him. I feel he'll be a part of it. Before his election to the Texas Senate in 2012, he served as 5 terms in the Texas House of Representatives. Currently, Senator Taylor serves as chairman of the Senate Committee on Education as a member of Senate Finance, Business, Commerce, and Higher Education Committees. He also co-chairs the Joint Interim Committee to study the coastal barrier system aimed at identifying methods of storm protection along the Texas Gulf Coast, a very needful thing. In 2015, Lieutenant Governor Patrick appointed Senator Taylor to the Legislative Budget Board, a permanent joint committee responsible for developing budget and policy recommendations for the legislatures and their appropriations. He is married to Carrie. They have 3 adult children and 2 grandchildren, and we all know how we love our grandchildren, and it is our privilege to be able to welcome him to the board. Oh, I don't see him here, so maybe he didn't make it. Coming on his way. Good, we'll see him in a few moments. I want to go ahead and bring up our moderator today, and Hector is a wonderful person, has been a good friend of mine, and a privilege to be able to share with him the many things that we've seen happen throughout the areas and we participated in. Hector is president, and he is the CEO of the Texas Chemical Council, TCC. He'll also be our moderator today in bringing the information that we feel is so very important. The Texas Chemical Council is a statewide trade association for chemical industry in Texas. It was founded in 1953, and TCC is the largest of U.S. state trade associations representing chemical manufacturers. Rivero has served on the board of directors of several business organizations, including the Texas Association of Business, the Texas Civil Justice League, Texas Taxpayer and Research Association, Mississippi Manufacturers Association, and the Austin Chamber of Commerce. A government affairs professional for over 20 years, Rivero has been instrumental in the passage of major tax reforms, civil justice reforms, environmental laws, and tax and constitutional amendments. Rivero was previously served as State Government Affairs Manager at EI DuPont de Nemours, with responsibility for 15 manufacturing plants in the U.S. Gulf Coast region and several research facilities across the U.S. and Puerto Rico. He has 2 children, resides in Austin. Hector is an active high school and college football official, is a past president of Austin Football Official Association, and a member of the Lone Star Conference. I'm so thankful to welcome my friend to the platform. Hector, if you'd come. Would you give this panel and all that are participating today a warm welcome? What a privilege it is to have them here today. I look forward to the information they will share. Hector, good.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. So, welcome everyone. Just another fabulous event. Just want to recognize Chad and the entire Economic Alliance team for putting on yet another outstanding forum. Let's give them a big round of a hand. So if y'all noticed, there's been a little change in the schedule. Unfortunately, Congressman Olson had to make a change in his schedule because of the activities going on with the congressional tours that are taking place with some of the other county and city officials and the U.S. Speaker of the House. But kind of like the Today Show, we just went out in the audience and grabbed somebody, and so we went and got Senator Larry Taylor, who was gracious enough to say, hey, I'll fill in. So we just told him, hurry up and get here. So he's on his way. He'll be here in just a couple minutes. But before we get that and allow him to be able to get up here and get settled, Chad asked me to share with the group a little bit about the experience the industry just had with this devastating storm. As all of you are well aware, we've talked about it several times yesterday and today, but this region and much of the Texas coast experienced a devastating weather event that impacted millions of Texans, destroyed our homes, cars, and many prized possessions. But Hurricane Harvey did not destroy the Texas spirit. I'll tell you, I had a few tears of sadness when I saw what happened to the city of Rockport down south, complete devastation. And of course, it was escalated when I saw the incredible flooding here in my hometown of Houston, where I grew up. But those were replaced with tears of joy when I saw the incredible response that our neighbors, the outpouring of support of neighbors helping neighbors, the incredible rescue fleets of the Texas Navy and the Cajun Navy from our friends across Sabine. And what an incredible job by all the local emergency responders, our National Guard, our local mayors, our county officials, and all the state emergency operations folks. In fact, I got a call, obviously, you know, we all remember Katrina and the devastation that happened over in Louisiana. I got a call from my counterpart over at the Louisiana Chemical Association, and he called me and he said, well, y'all showed us up once again. But he even complimented just what an incredible job this state and our people and our Texans did in responding. But I'm also very proud, and everyone within the chemical industry should be proud of the chemical industry's efforts to shut down facilities across the state in advance of Hurricane Harvey, and who prioritize the safety and well-being of their employees and their communities before, during, and after the storm. I want to share with you a little insight, especially for those of you that don't work in industry, have never worked in industry, to understand just how sophisticated and complex the involvement is here. The safety of workers and our neighbors drive our industry to take extensive planning and preparations for major weather events and other safety and security challenges. Our member companies have comprehensive and well-rehearsed emergency plans that are activated in close coordination with local, state, and federal authorities, other businesses, and distribution networks in the paths of the storm. Safely shutting down a chemical facility takes many hours, and in some instances, many days. And this is why our industry has extensive procedures and emergency plans. In preparation for Hurricane Harvey, well over 100 manufacturing facilities had to implement their emergency plans to protect the safety of their workers and surrounding communities. As the storm slowly wreaked havoc across the state, our association, TCC, worked closely with state emergency management officials to coordinate critical needs in our communities, and our members responded quickly to dozens of requests for assistance. Member companies helped provide chemicals to restore the water treatment plant in Corpus Christi. Companies sent MREs, or meals ready to eat, and tanks full of potable water to the Golden Triangle because they had lost their water supplies. We had one company provide medical grade nitrogen tanks for a trauma hospital in the Beaumont area so that they could treat patients. And companies donated chlorine for all the cleanup and sanitation needs that ensued immediately after the storm. But member companies also provided critical raw materials for refineries so that we could restore gasoline production. So, you know, these are the things that, unfortunately, we don't get a lot of press about that kind of thing, and our folks aren't looking for press. But they all called us and said, tell us what we can do to help. And while the chemical facilities are designed and built for hurricanes and major weather events, our employees' homes and our communities are susceptible to many of these storms, from damage from strong winds and from flooding. Our industry prioritizes supporting employees and their families and helping to ensure their safety, and that the neighborhoods surrounding our plants were also protected. The industry directly employs about 79,000 people. Thousands of industry employees have significant damage or complete loss to their homes, cars, and possessions, and as have countless families across the state. Some of our member companies have purchased mobile homes and trailers to temporarily house their employees and to feed them and their families that were displaced. Others have secured rental properties, hotel rooms to accommodate their people. And many employees who were not impacted directly by the storm went out and volunteered. And our member companies encouraged and supported this. Many of our member companies committed countless volunteer hours for their employees and tens of millions of dollars to the recovery efforts in their communities and all along the Gulf Coast. So just wanted to take a moment to tell you that we are all proud at how industry answered the call when our state and communities needed a helping hand, and to see the devastation that ensued and being involved with a lot of the emergency planning that was going on. It was an amazing feat and a compliment to the people of the chemical industry to be able to get through that event without any significant impacts to our people, to the environment, and to our communities. So appreciate you letting me make those initial comments before we got started. And Senator Taylor, welcome. Thank you so much for filling in. I mentioned to the crowd that this is kind of like the Today Show, so we just like grabbed you from the audience and said, "Come on in. We're gonna give you a makeover." So. Okay, so hopefully that wasn't too much of a buzzkill, but I appreciate y'all allowing me to do that. Very honored to have this distinguished panel, and we're going to jump right into it and talk about some of the perspectives that we've been dealing with on the regulatory front. Obviously, before the hurricane came in, Chad and I started talking about some of the things that we wanted to make sure we could share with all of our friends in the industrial community. And so we want to jump right into some of those things. And wanted to start off with a question to all of you. But there has been a positive change with the Environmental Protection Agency under the new administration, which will help keep Texas more globally competitive. What has been the most significant change in the regulatory environment since the beginning of 2017? And Commissioner, you want to start with you?
Sure. And real quick, though, I'd like to just touch on Harvey before we do that, because that's sort of consuming everything we're doing right now. But I want to make sure, I want to say thank you to you guys in the local communities for working with us and having patience with us as we've been trying to respond to the needs that you have. Same as Hector said, all of our employees that are down here were impacted just like you were. Many had to be evacuated from their homes themselves, and yet they're in the office trying to get public water systems, wastewater systems taken care of and up and running. Debris management is obviously job one right now. And so I appreciate you guys continuing to work with us on that. I also have to give Governor Abbott kudos and praise for the job that he's done and the leadership that I've seen. It's in the SOC, he is there all the time, and he has taken the helm and is doing a fantastic job, and it's been great to work with his staff through this whole process, and great to work with industry. Honestly, you know, as we go into these sorts of situations, if we don't have industry on board and working with us and communicating with us as they go through the shutdown procedures and the startup procedures, and the unforeseen things that sort of happen in between, we would be so far behind on many different levels. And they work with us, and we actually get a lot of great information that's doesn't just pertain to the plant, but everything sort of around it as well. And so, so that's been really great as well. Now to your question, the regulatory question. You know, for us, it's a really simple answer. They talk to us, and I don't mean that to. We talk to the EPA on a daily basis. The newspaper says that we don't, that we fight them all the time. The reality is 99% of the time we're working with them. But on those big decisions, the things that you see in the paper, the dramatic shift that I've seen has been the fact that they pick up the phone and they call and they say, "Hey, Texas. You have the largest petrochemical complex in the United States. What do you think about this? How does this impact you?" And that is so refreshing to have. So that it's a short answer, but it means so much. The other thing that's really interesting, and this comes out of Harvey with EPA, is that we're all sort of, as regulators, reminded about what our jobs are, and it's about public health, public safety, protecting the environment, and making sure the economy gets up and running as quickly as possible. It's not about being activists. It's about doing the job that Congress or the legislature gave us to do, and doing it well, and making sure that we can get the public, in this case, back to their normal lives as quickly as possible. So I'll stop with that. Cal?
Yeah, thank you, Hector. I'm, inclined to start off with the same statement that Toby did. They are talking to us as well as industry. Unfortunately, we had sometimes a more adversarial relationship with the prior administration. But with our industry right now in Texas and the Gulf region is ground zero for what we're seeing is really an unprecedented era of growth in chemical manufacturing in the United States. And you folks here all know why that's the case, where we've gone in the last 10 years from being one of the high-cost manufacturers of chemicals globally to now among the world's lowest-cost manufacturer of chemicals, and it's all because of natural gas and hydraulic fracturing. So we clearly now have moved into an era where we're seeing an unprecedented flood of new capital investment coming into the United States. At ACC, we keep a running total of that, and it's about $185 billion, 50% of which is already completed, another 50% which is in the planning stages that's going into chemical manufacturing. The Gulf region accounts for about 70% of that. And again, one of the things that is so critical to the flow of that investment is having the regulatory certainty. And under this administration, they are making it clear that we can respond to the appropriate environmental priorities that are important to people, whether you're in the industry or you're people that are living in downtown Austin or any part of this country. It's not mutually exclusive. In an environmentally responsive way to maximize the development of our energy resources and natural gas, which is the feedstock for the chemical industry. And now under this administration, we have greater certainty on that front. The other thing I would say is that now that we have this competitive advantage globally because of the feedstock advantage, because this $185 billion that's coming in, 62% of that is foreign direct investment. We have companies that outside of the country that are seeing the United States, again, with the competitive advantage that we have, that this is the best platform to serve a growing global marketplace. But we also have an opportunity, I think, with this new administration to make progress to complement our competitive advantage from a feedstock and manufacturing basis to also develop the world's most competitive regulatory environment. And a regulatory environment that, again, gives us a certainty that that will encourage that flow of capital investment in the manufacturing, but also to ensure we have the regulatory construct to ensure that the chemical industry will continue to be on the forefront of innovation. And we currently already have about 3 times more chemicals and patents that are issued to our industry than the European Union, the chemical manufacturers there. But we need to continue that. And just to give you one example of what has happened in just the last 9 months since Administrator Pruitt and the new administration has come on board. One of the most important things for our industry is the registration and the approval of new chemicals. In January or February of this year, we had a backlog of registrations or applications for new chemicals that was 600. That was really a remnant of the last administration. Secretary Pruitt, in the last 6 months, has been able to take that 600 backlog down to 80 applications that are existing today. And this is absolutely essential to our industry's ability to bring on new innovations, new technologies, some which are absolutely essential to ensure that our customer base can adopt more sustainable products and more sustainable practices that also respond to a broad set of interests beyond just economic.
Senator Taylor, anything you'd like to add on?
Well, obviously I'm not in the middle of it like these folks are, but from the outside looking in, the idea that they're listing is very encouraging, but I also think that, there's also effective regulation, kind of what you were saying there. We've done that in Texas. We've actually improved our air quality and those things while we were growing the industry. A lot of people think the only way you improve or clean the air is you shut people down. I think of some other states like California, et cetera. And the previous administration seemed to follow that model. If we're going to clean it, we just need to shut it down. Well, obviously that doesn't work if you're trying to take care of people at the same time and provide good jobs and a good economy for our people in the state. So the idea that the administration is listening and they're looking to follow more of the Texas example and ask us how to do things, so we've shown it here in Texas that you can actually improve the quality of our environment at the same time you're growing industry, and I think that's a huge plus for us. And frankly, I think we have an administration that tends to like us, which there were so many times where it didn't look like the previous administration liked us. So I'm very encouraged by what's going on.
Thank you, Senator. Cal, you brought up TSCA reform a little bit, and then that stands for the Toxic Substance Control Act. And Cal, you and the ACC really led the charge to work with Congress to get well overdue reforms to TSCA. Tell us a little bit more about TSCA, how important that is to our industry and why our industry supports that, and how the implementation of TSCA reforms are going as we said.
Yeah, one of the, the major legislative achievements that the industry has been able to secure over the last maybe 2 decades was the modernization of the Toxic Substance Control Act, which is EPA's assessment of the safety of chemicals in commerce. We were seeing over the past decade a decline in the public's confidence in EPA's ability to do a good job on that front, which was then resulting in an increasing number of states that were developing their own programs to assess the safety in chemicals. And if you're a manufacturer, you want to have one standard, one entity, and it should be EPA that is making that determination. So you'll have consistency among all 50 states in the regulations that you have to comply with. So we were able to move this legislation forward, which did put some increased obligations on industry for us to be assured that we were providing the information and the data and the research that we conduct. We spend literally hundreds of millions of dollars on this to ensure that we could demonstrate that the chemicals that are being used in commerce today are safe for their existing use. And so we have a new format now and a program and an approach that we think is going to, again, demonstrate that there is an effective way to ensure that consumers and families have the confidence that these chemicals are safe. But it also requires, again, that the regulations are done in a cost-effective way. And that example I used on the new chemicals provision, it was basically EPA, a year ago, from our perspective, overreaching and trying to, in terms of wanting more and more data that really wasn't even essential to some of the use. Those chemicals were never going to be used for that particular use. And that was bogging down the innovation pipeline, which our industry is so proud of. What the industry is also committed, we need to do a better job of identifying and doing an inventory of all the existing chemicals in commerce. Even when we talked about the Hurricane Harvey incident here, our industry has an opportunity, or has an obligation, I should say, to be transparent to the degree that we can, making first and foremost that the regulatory agency and the first responder community have access to the information, that we're working in a collaborative fashion to ensure that they know if there's a hazard that they could confront in responding to some type of a release of an emission. We have that collaborative relationship now that is really making a difference in our ability to operate in a responsible way and also be good corporate citizens in the communities that we operate in.
Excellent. Gentlemen, y'all, any commentary? I know that's a federal issue, but as a follow-up, Cal, let me ask you, looking at other initiatives, because that was, as you mentioned, that was a Herculean effort on the part of industry. But what's next on the horizon as far as needed regulatory change? But potentially, is there hope or opportunity to maybe see some change with regard to the National Ambient Air Quality Standard or the ozone standards that EPA has recently adapted? There's been a lot of talk of trying to pull the last standard change back.
Well, I think you see with the ambient air quality standards, as well as a host of other regulations that were implemented in maybe the last year of the Obama administration, that some of the relative agencies, and most often it's EPA, that is put in abeyance the enforcement of those regulations until they have an opportunity to consider whether or not we ought to initiate a whole new rulemaking that could then modify those regulations. That's our best hope for a host of the regulations that we're currently involved in. Because there was a lot of, I think, what I would say, there's a lot of pent-up demand, not just in the chemical industry, but in the broader value chain, the broader manufacturing sector, that we could take a more common sense and balanced approach to the regulations that are being imposed on manufacturers. But, people have to also be political realists. And it takes, while you have a majority in the House of Representatives that are able to pass legislation that would have a more balanced approach to the regulations, be it air, water, or chemicals. In the Senate, you don't have that vote yet. You have a makeup now that is 52 Republicans, 48 Democrats, and you need 60 votes in the Senate to pass anything. And most of the regulatory issues that have been considered in the Senate, very few of them have been able to put together that bipartisan majority of, or bipartisan vote of 60 in order to see fundamental legislative reform here. So I think what is incumbent upon us, and we have that opportunity, is get back to this conversations that we're now able to engage with the administration and the relevant regulatory agencies that allows, TCEQ in the state of Texas to join with industry and with the other constituencies to have a meaningful conversation on a modified rulemaking process that hopefully can strike a better balance.
Commissioner Baker, anything to add?
Yes, I think that's exactly right, Cal. This open communication that we have, where I see it going, is exactly what you just talked about. I think on things like ozone, for instance, I would put my toxicologist at TCEQ up against anyone in the United States as far as expertise. And we have scientists on staff. We have absolute experts in this field. And if you look at the actual data, it doesn't always line up with some of the studies that EPA relied on to get to the conclusions they landed at. And so the ability to actually introduce actual data into the conversation is very refreshing, and I'm hoping that as that conversation continues, we'll have that opportunity.
Excellent.
Let me just add another important point on this. What the administration also has the executive authority to change some of their processes. And so one of the most important things was that led to some of the regulations being imposed was in the past administration was how do you do a cost-benefit analysis to consider what are the economic impacts of a regulation. Now, the problem when you go down that path is that you can be fairly creative in terms of how you are calculating those costs unless you have a very disciplined process. And there was an issue which we called the social cost of carbon, which they would then do an extrapolation where they would try to identify, with carbon emissions, a very expansive definition and assessment of what would be the social cost, which then they would translate into economic cost. One of the first things that this administration has determined that they're going to do is to modify that. And the result of that is significant on regulations because it results in a different cost-benefit calculation. And it also allows a better conversation and consideration that we all commit to, we need to improve the environment. Our industry knows we need to reduce our emissions. We're committed to doing that. But there's some approaches to that are more cost-effective than others. And if we're going to have a regulation that's going to impose requirements on us, we ought to be doing it in the most cost-effective manner. And that's where these, the administration's approach in doing a more balanced assessment of the costs and the benefits is going to make, I think, a meaningful difference in terms of the cost of operations in a lot of chemical facilities and other manufacturers.
So we've talked a little bit about the impact that changes in EPA have had, the shale economy, in order to make investment a possibility. But none of this investment would be a reality if we didn't have the skilled workforce to be able to build and operate and maintain these facilities. And that's been a challenge that we've had in Texas, but that I think the Texas legislature answered the beacon call to. Senator Taylor, as chairman of the Senate Education Committee, you've been an advocate for education reform, making sure that our high school kids have flexibility in their curriculum to be able to pursue career and tech courses, and even dual credit opportunities to take advantage of collaborations with our junior colleges, community colleges that do such an outstanding job in this region and in support of the petrochemical industry. How are things going, and what's next on the horizon?
Well, the legislature made a turn here a few sessions ago, particularly with House Bill 5, if you remember. We were under the, I think, false premise for a while that everybody needed to go to college. That's what our goal was, to get everybody to college. And that's not accurate. I mean, we all know that people are gifted and talented in different ways, and some people are very, very talented with their hands and can put things together and do things, and other people are more scholastically minded and science and that type of thing. But we need to meet all those students. And a lot of time we talk about education being the future of Texas. Well, living in this area, it's not the future, it's now. We have demands for jobs right now that we don't have enough skilled labor to fill. So we've made some pretty drastic changes already, working with our community colleges and our industry folks. And this past session, we passed a bill called a PTEC program. You've heard of early college high school? This is like an early trade high school where kids can start in high school as a freshman and start working with industry and community colleges on coming out with a certification or an associate's degree in some of the type of jobs that we actually need right now. And they have internships built into it. And at the end of their 6 years, they have an associate's degree and a job, which is pretty important. And especially when you look at the type of jobs that we have available here. These are high-paying, good jobs, and they're great careers. And unfortunately, a lot of kids just aren't aware of the jobs even exist. We tried to make a transition with our counseling and other things to try to let kids know what's out there. And this now will start at an earlier age to start opening up the minds of these children to see what's out there and things they could be working towards that fit in their skill set, that's more aligned with what they like to do. So I think it's very important. And in that time we were going after everybody going to college, we had kids that weren't geared that way. We called them dropouts. Well, now we have something for everyone. We're trying to meet that need all the way across the spectrum. And so I'm really excited about the opportunities. Our community colleges in this area and our industry in this area has been very cooperative and very involved in this process up to this point. This is going to give them another avenue to get further into that. So I'm really excited about that.
That's all. And I'll even make mention that in response to that, just yesterday we were able to attend the groundbreaking at San Jacinto College that just broke ground on their new petrochemical and energy technology center just directly across the street. And the designs that we've looked at are incredible. And what makes it so timely is the colleges work with industry and say, what exactly do you need? What's the curriculum? What are the labs? What are the equipments that we need kids working on and learning about so that they can immediately jump into a career in industry? And so just having been involved a little bit with House Bill 5, take great pride to see the collaboration, thanks to your leadership in helping to accommodate that between our public schools, our colleges, not only our two-year colleges, but also our four-year colleges, and the stimulus that you've created to encourage industry and this education community to work with industry to meet the needs of employers. So job well done. Thank you.
Well, we really are all in this together. I mean, the industry needs the employees.
Yeah.
The state needs a well-employed workforce, and it's going to help secure the future of Texas.
Yeah, and then maybe we can stop robbing all the smart people from TCEQ to come work in industry, right, Toby?
That would be great. We're the best training facility in the state for
That's
you
right.
guys.
Mr. Dooley, speaking about workforce, I mean, you work with the CEOs of all of these major companies in our industry, and you're seeing growth, not just the growth in Texas, but all across the country. What is the importance of a skilled workforce to sustain the continued growth that we're trying to see within the industry?
Well, it's absolutely critical. I mean, as I said, we've seen this unprecedented growth in our industry. We need skilled tradespeople to really help in the construction of the facilities. We have been fortunate that we've been able to manage that to date. But also, when you look in the process engineers that we need in our facilities, that's a whole skill set. And if you also overlay that with the demographics of our existing workforce, we went through a period of time in the decades, say from 1990 to 2000, maybe 2005, where we lost about 25% of our workforce. We weren't hiring too many people. And so we had this workforce that was pre-1990, 1995, that is now getting pretty close to the retirement. So we have this bulge, basically, that's going to result in a significant increased demand and our process engineers, people that have the technical skills. And so we are partnering with a lot of different states, a lot of community colleges, trying to increase the STEM school enrollments so that we ensure that we're not impeded in capitalizing on this competitive advantage we have for the lack of a skilled workforce.
And I'll just add, this isn't just important to the Texas Chemical Council members. We've got the Association of Chemical Industries of Texas, which are made up of 450 small and large businesses, contractors, suppliers, and other service providers to industry that desperately need the skilled labor to be able to meet their obligations to their customers. And so to see the engagement, not just of the owner companies engaging with the community colleges and with our school districts, we're seeing the actual suppliers and the contractors directly involved with the development of curriculum, working with the colleges, supporting financially, supporting the investments that are necessary to give them the skilled workforce as well. So this is an incredible industry top to bottom and an incredible effort. Again, compliments to you, Senator Taylor, the Texas Senate, Texas House Representatives, for having the foresight to make these meaningful changes. I wanted to switch back over to a little bit about permitting, Commissioner Baker. As we're trying to continue to attract new investment, one of the most competitive things that we have to achieve is making sure that we can secure permits in a timely fashion. There's been criticism in the past that, permits can take sometimes, depending on whether or not they're contested, which is we're one of the only states that allow that type of process, a permit can take 1.5 years up to 2 years. And that really is kind of a deal killer for a lot of companies that are trying to meet customer demands and move in a timely fashion. The legislature and TCEQ assisted with that by creating an expedited permitting process. Tell us a little bit about how that process works, how it's working, and if you're able to sustain the demand for new permits.
Sure. So to give you just sort of the context of what we're talking about, depending on the quality of the permit application, which varies greatly, as you can imagine, and sort of case by case, a permit application usually takes between 10 to 14 months. If you're in a non-attainment area and you're getting some sort of a PSD or GHG PSD permit, then you're probably going to look at least 18 months realistically for that to be done. When you get into the expedited permit, what our goal is to try to save at least, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't sound like a lot, but if we can shave 3 months off of the process, I think that's meaningful. In 2017, we processed a little over 400 expedited permits, and the average time we shaved off of those permits was about 3 months. So that says 3 months of cost and time. I think we can get better. I don't know. We're sort of looking at that process now and seeing how we can do it. We've done some other things that really aren't related to sort of PSD permits, but more on the permits by rule and standard permits that have actually helped there as well. So we have an e-permit program where we're trying to shift a lot of that to the web, where you can go in and get an immediate answer. You fill out the information, and then you could get a letter generated right then that says you have your permit. And so we've seen people starting to take advantage of that, which has been really great. We also have a new sort of enhanced permit review process or application review process. And so when we have major air permits come in, we sort of have a all hands on deck reaction to those. And so with the goal being that we can identify deficiencies quickly and get them back to the applicants usually within a week or two to say, hey, we need to have these things before we can really look at it. And so so that's been a nice shift. I think a lot of times it would come in and sort of languish, and now we sort of all hands on deck attack those things and send them back to the applicants. And then finally, we have this program for what we would call it's called RAP, but readily available permits. And right now, it only exists for simple cycle turbines. But the idea would be that you would almost have a draft permit ready to go, and if you can come in with the data and the science that sort of fits into that, you get the permit out the door. And it's we only have one of these right now, but I think the idea would be that we could continue to develop this program and take it into all the different areas that we issue permits in. So there's things that are happening. One of the challenges that we have as an agency is that the technology's there, but it's in budget-strapped years. It's tough to go in and say, "Hey, I need millions and millions of dollars to move everything, onto the web and the internet." That's a pie in the sky sort of, moonshot, and we'll get there eventually, but we're not there yet. But as we continue to use more and more technology, I think you're going to see these things continue to speed up.
Excellent.
It's just sort of catching up with that technology that exists, and when it becomes cheap enough for us to be able to afford it, is sort of an ongoing challenge.
We appreciate all the work y'all have done to try to help industry be able to continue to get those permits in a timely fashion. Cal, quickly, let me ask, Hurricane Harvey obviously has had a devastating impact on not only the region but on industry, and it's going to consume a tremendous amount of assets in the recovery mode. Everyone in this room is anxious for the economic growth in this region and in this state to continue. How do you feel that the hurricane, the recovery, is going to impact capital investment within our industry? And is there still hope for the second wave of shale gas economic boom?
Well, let me just recite the figure: $185 billion in new capital investment in chemical manufacturing. If you go back to 2016, the year 2016, Department of Commerce figures say that of all manufacturing investment in the United States in 2016, the chemical industry accounted for 48% of it. That's an astounding number. You look at the Gulf region, it accounts for 70% of the investment. You accounted for, in the Gulf region, the chemical industry in the Gulf region accounted for almost 34% of all investment in manufacturing in 2016. Now, when we look at the impacts of Hurricane Harvey, I think as Hector said in his opening comments here, is that our industry came through this, we think, in a very good fashion. Were we perfect? No. But we came through this with minimum impacts on our employees and workplace safety incidences, minimum impacts in environmental releases. We had 17 crackers that went down. All but 3 are back up and operating now. They shut down in a judicious fashion, and they're brought back online in a responsible fashion. I think that we have demonstrated that this region, even in spite of an unprecedented natural event, is still a sound place to do business and enhance chemical manufacturing. We are confident because of this competitive advantage we have in natural gas. When you look at the Gulf region, the access to the feedstock, you're going to continue to see a flow of new and additional investment for the foreseeable future. You're going to continue to see 60% of this investment come from outside the United States. But there are opportunities, and your delegation is working in a very effective fashion to see how you can even further enhance the certainty of operations here. The Coastal Spine Project, and there's issues like that we can do. The distribution that we heard about earlier. How can we ensure that we are maximizing the ability to capitalize on this flood of new manufacturing of chemicals that will continue to come into this region?
Excellent. So, Senator Taylor, we're going to let you take us out in a Herculean way, or should I refer
No
to you
pressure.
as the prophet, Senator Larry Taylor, because since Hurricanes Ike and Rita, you have been a champion promoting the need for a coastal barrier system in our state from storm surge protection for the upper Texas coast, which is about 6.5 million people. And just this session, you passed a resolution urging Congress to fund the project and to expedite the Corps of Engineering process so that we can get the design and build going. In the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey, what is the prospect for expediting a coastal spine for our region.
Well, Hector, I think it's good. And I think it's worth reminding people that Harvey was an incredible event, 50-plus inches of rain. But I have to remind you, I've now lived through 3 500-year floods. How old does that make me? I don't know. But we had 43 inches of rain in 24 hours, if you remember 1979 with Claudette. 43 inches of rain in 24 hours. And the areas that were impacted by that, many of those were surpassed by Harvey, with its 50 inches spread out over 3.5 days. But I think it's important when you're talking to people to remind them that this was a rain event. So people say, well, the coastal barrier wouldn't have done anything. But I'll tell you what, a 12 to 15-foot storm surge coming right up the ship channel makes up for a lot of inches of rain. I mean, do the math. And think about that 12 to 15-foot storm surge coming up there and jacking up. And you'll see some of the same type of flooding you saw with Harvey in the residential areas particularly, but you'll add the industrial sectors as well. And, you know, we will recover from this storm as it worked out. We will recover. We're rebuilding. I mean, I've just been overwhelmed with the response we've gotten, neighbors helping neighbors, people coming from outside the area, jumping in. I think FEMA is very much committed to this process. The president's been down here a number of times, the vice president. We are going to rebuild this, but at the same time, we can't just rebuild it. We've got to rebuild it better than it was. We've got to harden our facilities. The fact is, we're sitting on the most unprotected, largest petrochemical complex in the world. The largest one has a gate. They have the levees. We don't. Port Arthur has, Freeport has, the middle, the Houston Ship Channel. Texas City has a levee. The Houston Ship Channel is not protected. And the good news out of the bad news, we had a terrible storm, but the good news is the country's attention was focused on this area. The sympathy level is high for this area. Congressional members are talking about it. They're involved in this. This is our opportunity to get what they received after Katrina, after they received, you know, after the storm in Sandy, what they received there. This is our opportunity. So we've been moving through this process. In fact, we have another interim hearing coming up on October coming up in Galveston. I don't remember the date. But we're still working on the process. We've been moving through the process. We have an environmental study that's supposed to be completed next summer, which will hopefully give us the okay across the board to get this thing done. But we need a direct appropriation from Congress with a deadline. Here's the money. Go build it. If we go through the Army Corps of Engineers' normal process, and I'm not saying anything bad about the Army Corps, it's just the way their process is, we will be talking and building on this for 20, 25 years. On average, our area gets hit on every 9 to 15 years with a major storm. We don't have that time. So we have a video that's been put together by some of the supporters of this project. It's an updated video, and it's about 5 minutes. If y'all would run that video, this is something we could take to Congress and help sell this project.
Tonight on the Weather Guide. It's been 3 weeks since Hurricane Michelle slammed into the Texas Gulf Coast, shutting down the refineries and chemical plants along the Houston Ship Channel. Gasoline rationing is in effect nationwide as prices approach $8 a gallon.
Man, I'm waiting in line like everybody else. Can you just give me time to put it in drive?
Pay attention, pull forward.
Why don't you get back in your truck and I'll be on my way?
No,
before
look
you
at
get in trouble.
everybody in this line. All these people are waiting for you to get gas.
Everybody's waiting in line.
Let's go.
Everybody's waiting in line. Try, put your camera away.
Get in your car.
Hurricane Michelle is now officially the worst hurricane disaster in U.S. history. This Category 5 storm, with sustained winds of more than 180 miles per hour, poured into Galveston Bay at the mouth of the Houston Ship Channel, killing more than 2,300 people. And the president has declared a state of national emergency. Hurricane Michelle is just the latest giant hurricane to inflict catastrophic damage on the upper Texas coast.
Carla, one of the major Gulf hurricanes of this century, began a general west-northwestward movement towards the Texas coast.
Airports closed to traffic, hangars bent and twisted. The damage was universal. Skyscrapers popped out windows in the high winds, raining down glass.
Huge evacuation, the biggest in U.S. history.
And a lack of fuel along evacuation.
They found some more bodies in that area. Is that right? In that flooded area, going house to house?
For those of us living on the upper Texas coast, we see a major hurricane on average about once every 15 years. The problem is, in the lull between these big storms, we tend to forget how devastating they can be. We tend to think, well, we made it through the last one, why should I worry about the next one?
Right now, the 17-foot seawall here on Seawall Boulevard, you can see the water is going over the top of it, and it's very treacherous. We can't.
In 2008, Hurricane Ike rocked Texas with a near direct hit on Galveston, sending a 10 to 15-foot storm surge onto the island and the western end of Galveston Bay.
We got lucky with Hurricane Ike. We were very fortunate that it did not land where they had predicted it to land.
We dodged a bullet on September the 13th, 2008.
If it had just been a little further over, then in terms of all gas production, refineries, jet fuel would have been affected. You would have felt the impact, not just on the coast, not just in the state of Texas, but throughout the United States.
The Port of Houston and the Houston Ship Channel has been an economic engine for the region going back to the 1840s.
It's truly a major artery for the most important economy in the world.
Of all the ports in the United States, this port is the only one that exports more than import, I think by approximately 9%.
From an infrastructure perspective, the Houston Ship Channel is a major transportation and logistics hub. And so this is an important downstream artery for the energy industry for the entirety of the country, and you can argue for the hemisphere.
In the Houston region, there are over 500 chemical plants. Many of those are located along the Houston Ship Channel. We are essentially the chemicals and plastics manufacturing center for the United States.
And probably by 2019 or 2020, we will produce more refined products and petrochemical products along the Houston Ship Channel than anywhere else in the world.
We've got 132 plant sites located along the Houston Ship Channel. It's got an employee base of about 27,000 direct employees and probably a couple 100,000 contractors that service the industry.
The petrochemical industry is a lifeblood for the national economy. My understanding is that a quarter of the nation's petroleum product is refined in this region alone.
27% of the gas, 60+% of the aviation fuel, 80% of the military grade fuel.
When you start talking about natural gas production, you're talking close to about 35%. When you factor in refineries, national implication.
The impact to the chemical industry in the event of a Category 3+ storm would be incalculable.
We are not just impacted on the Gulf Coast, but the entire United States is adversely affected.
You could possibly put 4 to 5 feet of water inside all those specialty chemical complexes, which would virtually shut down those complexes for anywhere from 18 to 36 months.
Yeah, when our refinery is shut down for some closure in the ship channel, gas prices immediately go up on the East Coast.
Gas would go to $7 or $8 a gallon. It would be gas lines again like we had back in the 70s.
It's just basic economics. If we were producing less crude, less refined products, less plastics, the price would go up and it would trickle throughout the entire economy.
Now, what would airlines do when they can't get fuel? What happens to the price? What happens to the price of airline tickets? What happens when the military can't get fuel?
If we as a nation were to see an extended interruption in that fuel supply, the military would be very concerned very quickly.
We have plants that produce pharmaceuticals and medical supply products, and we have plants that produce automotive and construction supplies and everything in between that. So there's not a part of factories and manufacturing and consumer goods in the United States that wouldn't be impacted.
Once the storm gets through, you've got recovery. You've got to get back in, you've actually got to get the plant back up and running again. And it takes humans to do that.
Those employees have a lot of other things on their mind, understandably, their family and their home. And so the human factor side of that is significant.
If people can't get to work, then it affects the tax base, it affects the production, it protects all the goods and services that we provide as a region.
Hurricane Ike is a $30 billion event. We've gotten almost nothing.
From a local standpoint, we've done a lot. But from a federal standpoint, we've done nothing.
When you look to our friends to the east, whether it's in Louisiana, New York, New Jersey, they were more than fully reimbursed.
New Orleans has a levee system around it. We don't have a levee system out here protecting our area.
It was $15.5 billion to build a system around New Orleans itself. They protected 340,000 people. What we're trying to do here is protect 5.5 million people and about 6% of the gross national product of the United States of America.
The biggest killer in a hurricane is the surge. Probably 3/4 of the total damages in a hurricane is due to storm surge.
The idea is very simple. You stop the surge at the coast. You don't let it get in the inland waters.
The coastal barrier system would be an idea, an ambitious vision to protect the greater Houston area, the Ship Channel, residents of Galveston Island, for the better part of 6 counties from a Category 3+ storm.
Well, the coastal spine is an extension of the seawall, built in the early 1900s. It will extend along the coast with a hard structure, but covered with sand and seagrass, so you won't even know that there's a coastal barrier there.
Bolivar Roads is the critical part of it, where the Houston Ship Channel comes between and comes from the Gulf of Mexico into Galveston Bay. What we're looking at now is approximately 850-foot wide floating gates that we can close in that period sometime before the storm comes ashore to prevent the pre-surge from coming into the bay. In addition to that, you're going to close off the balance of that with sluice gates, which prevents the high tides basically from coming into Galveston Bay.
The Netherlands is a prime example of how you can accomplish this.
They have big gates that protect them. They have barriers that protect them. They put it together. They have a coastal spine, just like we want here. They close those gates and use that barrier 26 times, and it's worked every time.
So we know the engineering is there. We know there's a process that works. And I think what we need to do is say, look, we're going to get proactive. We're going to spend a little bit of money up front, but we're going to save a lot of lives, a lot of families with children, a lot of properties, a lot of industry, a lot of jobs.
It's a huge opportunity, and I hope we can take advantage of it.
For a city like Houston that innovates in ways that, that Texans have always admired, whether it's in the energy space or the space industry with NASA, you know, I think that this is doable and we can do this.
Either we're going to make the investment that can prevent huge losses, or we're going to be short-sighted and think that we have plenty of time and then wait until it's too late. And literally, you could be spending $100 billion to replace the Gulf Coast.
It's going to require everybody to lock arms and be on the same page, from the local level to the counties, to the state, and of course the federal government. We think that this is the time to now inform the public, get them involved, and get them in support of the plan.
Help protect our families, our property, our businesses, and our nation's economy against the fury of the next monster storm. Contact your national, state, and local elected representatives and voice your support for the coastal spine.
Well, that's an outstanding video. I want to thank everybody that was involved in the production of that. If that doesn't make the case for our congressional delegation and hopefully persuade others around the country of the need for this, then we've got tough roads ahead. But let me thank our panelists for an outstanding job, and thank you for being here, Senator Taylor, on short notice. We hope your wife likes your makeover here on the Today Show. But anyway, thank you very much, and then that concludes this panel.